There are moments the world never plans to witness, when the veil of ceremony is pierced by something deeper, something raw, human, and divine. It was meant to be a day of honor. The great auditorium of St. Dominic High School stood adorned with velvet banners and golden laurels, its polished floor gleaming beneath soft cathedral lights. 100 cameras had gathered, each lens hungry to capture the return of a son of the school, Robert Francis Prevost, now known to the world as Pope Leo XIV. The invitation had called it a homecoming. A day to celebrate how far one man had risen. But no one expected the most powerful moment would come, not from the stage, nor the dignitaries seated beneath its grandeur, but from a corner most had long stopped seeing. There, beyond the halo of light, an old man moved slowly. His steps measured, the weight of years pressed gently upon his shoulders. His name was Salvatore Russo. For 65 years, he had served these halls, quietly, faithfully. The janitor whom generations of students had passed with little more than a glance. Yet there he stood, at 87, still pushing a worn mop across the marble floor, as though time itself had forgotten him. The world's eyes were fixed upon the stage. But Pope Leo's gaze drifted, steady, unwavering, to that single figure in the shadows. And in that instant, the pageantry of the day dissolved. He saw not the cameras, nor the gathered clergy, nor the eager faces awaiting his speech. He saw a man who had given his life to serve. Unseen. Uncelebrated it. Still serving, when others would not have remembered his name. Without a word, Pope Leo rose. The room stilled. Every breath seemed to hush as he stepped down from the dais, his white robes trailing softly behind him. Past the bishops. Past the officials. Past the velvet ropes. Toward the old janitor still scrubbing the floor. And what happened next, would leave the entire school in tears. And send a lesson echoing far beyond those ancient walls. But before we begin, consider this, how many such souls pass beneath our gaze, unseen? And if you had stood in that room, where would your eyes have fallen? But before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from today? And as you watch, remember, we do not tell these stories for entertainment, but for awakenings. Subscribe now to God's message for souls, because in this broken world, you never know when a single moment could reveal the heart of heaven. The boy had always walked those halls with quiet eyes. Long before the papal ring, the white cassock, the weight of the fisherman's shoes, there had been Robert Francis Prevost, a slender youth with worn shoes, carrying too many questions and too few answers. St. Dominic High School had been his refuge. Not a place of privilege, but of struggle, where every textbook was hard-won, every opportunity fragile. And in the quiet spaces between lessons, there had been one figure who never demanded notice, yet seemed always present. Mr. Salvatore Russo. An Italian immigrant, who had arrived in America decades earlier with little more than a battered suitcase and a heart full of devotion. He had come to sweep floors, scrub stone, and repair what others left broken. But to young Robert, he was more than that. In the early mornings, when the corridors still whispered with the cold breath of dawn, Robert would often see him, humming softly in Italian, hands steady upon broom and mop. Always a smile. Always a kind nod. And sometimes, a quiet word, courage, ragazzo. The world sees the surface. God sees the heart. Such words took root in a boy whose heart was hungry for more than this world's fleeting glories. Years passed. Robert grew. From student to seminarian, from priest to bishop, and now Pope Leo XIV. But beneath the layers of titles and honors, some memories refused to fade. Now, decades later, the world watched. A grand ceremony had been arranged, streamed live across continents. The first return of Pope Leo XIV to his alma mater. An event meant to inspire, to dazzle. The auditorium swelled with luminaries, bishops in crimson, politicians in tailored suits, journalists poised like hawks. Every gaze fixed upon the stage where the white-robed pontiff would soon speak. And there, amidst the orchestrated perfection, a quiet figure moved. Salvatore Russo. His hair now silvered, his back more stooped, but his rhythm unchanged. Across the marble floors he worked, unnoticed by the eager cameras. An old janitor still serving a school, and a world, that had long since outpaced him. To most, he was invisible. A relic of the past, tolerated but forgotten. But not to the Pope. As Pope Leo XIV entered the great hall, the crowd erupted in applause. He smiled softly, nodding in blessing, yet his eyes were searching. And then, they found him. In a shadowed corner, beneath the glow of chandeliers and banners, stood Salvatore Russo, mop in hand, moving with slow, deliberate care. Time seemed to pause. The grand words prepared for the day blurred in Pope Leo's mind. The polished speeches, the awaiting cameras, all faded. One thought remained: he is still here, still serving. The question hung in the air, unseen by the crowd but thunderous within the Pope's heart. Would he look away, as so many did? Would he allow the machinery of the day to roll on, unbroken? Or would he act, and shatter the illusion of the moment? The answer would soon echo beyond that hall. But now, I ask you, if you had stood beneath those banners, with the eyes of the world upon you, would you have seen the janitor? Or the throne? The applause had not yet faded when the first voice rose. Not from the bishops, nor from the honored guests, but from a different corner of the room. A voice sharp as glass beneath velvet. Angela Ferraro. A journalist known more for provocation than praise. Her bylines often dripped with skepticism, her reports fed a world eager to tear down what it could not fully grasp. And today, she had come hunting contradiction. Camera at her shoulder, microphone poised, Angela leaned to her colleague with a knowing smirk. Pope's talk of humility. Let's see if he even notices that janitor. The remark was soft, meant for those nearby, but such words, once spoken, have a way of curdling the air. Even before the Pope had reached the lectern, a new current ran beneath the room's polished surface. A test had been laid, not of doctrine, but of authenticity. Pope Leo XIV stood beneath the arching banners of St. Dominic. The cameras found him, the lights crowned him, but his gaze remained gentle, almost distant. He had seen the man in the shadows. The weight of that vision had not left him. Angela struck first, her tone polite, her eyes anything but. Your Holiness, she began, voice warm with professional grace, how do you stay connected to your roots amidst all this grandeur? It was a question that played well for the audience. On its surface, innocent. Beneath it, a blade, thin and cold. Would the Pope answer with platitudes? Would he perform the expected humility? Pope Leo's voice rose, not loud, but clear, carrying an older wisdom. By remembering those who served without applause, he said, his words slow, deliberate. And as he spoke, his eyes drifted. Not to the crowd. Not to the crimson-robed bishops at his side. But toward Mr. Russo. A flicker only, a glance. Yet it was enough. Those watching closely would feel it, this was not theater. It was memory, and conscience. Angela noted it. She leaned in, sensing opportunity. Words are easy, she pressed, voice lilting with challenge. Will we see action today? The room held its breath. Would the Pope retreat to safe abstractions? Would he defer to the schedule, to the pomp prepared in his name? A faint smile touched Pope Leo's face, not the smile of evasion, but of knowing. Faith without deeds is dead, he replied softly. No flourish. No defense. Only truth, quiet as a blade unsheathed. And beneath the swelling tension, the room began to shift. Some faces turned, finally, to where the Pope had looked. Toward the old man still scrubbing the floor. And for the first time that day, many saw him not as background, but as brother. Now I ask you, if that truth touched your heart, subscribe to God's message for souls. The question hung between them, faith without deeds is dead, yet the moment had not passed. It had only deepened. The weight of the words had stirred the room, eyes flickered, conversations paused. But for Angela Ferraro, silence was not a retreat. It was an opening. She leaned forward, voice now edged with certainty. Many say the Church speaks of serving the poor, yet forgets the humble in its own walls. It was not a question, but an accusation dressed in the robes of inquiry. And the hall stirred. Some heads nodded faintly. The journalists tensed, sensing the scent of conflict. Pope Leo stood motionless, hands resting lightly upon the lectern. His gaze did not waver, yet something shifted within his posture, a resolve unfolding. He spoke no words. Instead, he moved. Without ceremony, without signal, Pope Leo XIV stepped down from the dais. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras jolted to life. The room seemed to breathe as one, drawn forward by unseen gravity. He walked past the crimson-robed prelates, past the finely dressed dignitaries whose eyes widened in surprise. The air thickened. Every lens followed him, every voice caught in a hush. There, in the far corner, where the lights did not reach, stood Salvatore Russo. Still working. Still unseen. The sound of the mop ceased as the pontiff approached. And then, Pope Leo knelt. He lowered himself to one knee upon the cool marble, robes folding softly beneath him. The cameras clicked in a frenzy, but within the lens of that moment, something older stirred, not spectacle, but reverence. "Do you remember me?" Pope Leo asked, voice low, steady. Mr. Russo straightened, eyes moist but sharp with memory. "Of course, young Robert," he said, smile trembling. "You were the boy who thanked me every morning, when no one else did." The words hung in the air, simple, unvarnished. Yet beneath them lay a history few had seen, and fewer had honored. Angela was not silent. Her heels clicked sharply across the floor as she drew closer, microphone in hand. Her voice cut cold through the reverent hush. A photo op? Or genuine compassion? The question sought to deflate, to reduce the sacred to the cynical. Yet Pope Leo did not rise, nor did his tone sharpen. "You mistake remembrance for performance," he answered softly, eyes never leaving Mr. Russo's. Then, rising slowly, he turned to those gathered, voice gathering weight not from volume, but from the truth it carried. "This man," he said, motioning gently, "mended broken chairs so we could sit and learn. He taught dignity through service, not through sermon, but through silent faithfulness. Today," his voice deepened, "I honor that lesson. Not with words, nor with applause, but by remembering whom we are called to see, and whom we so often forget." And in that moment, the hall stilled. Journalists lowered their cameras. Bishops folded their hands. Many in the crowd felt the sting, not of accusation, but of conscience. Angela Ferraro had built her career on unmasking facades. She had exposed politicians, dismantled staged charity drives, unspun the hollow words of men in high places. And now, beneath the vaulted ceilings of St. Dominic High School, she smelled performance. Or so she told herself. The Pope's kneeling had drawn reverent silence, but to Angela, reverence was a mask too easily worn. She stepped forward again, voice sharper, no longer cloaked in polite cadence. "Is this PR, or penance for forgotten servants?" The room stiffened. The question rang out with barbed clarity, seeking to puncture the stillness that had begun to soften even the hardest hearts. Pope Leo XIV rose slowly, his gaze resting upon her. Not with judgment, but with a calm that unnerved more than anger ever could. "Why does honoring dignity offend you?" he asked, not as a challenge, but as a mirror held before her. Angela's breath caught. For a moment, the practiced composure faltered. Yet pride is a strong tether. Because it wasn't done sooner, she answered, voice strained between conviction and deflection. Too many serve and vanish, unseen. One gesture does not absolve years of blindness. Pope Leo's eyes softened. Not in retreat, but in understanding the wound beneath her words. When he spoke again, it was with the quiet strength of a man who had walked both privilege and poverty. Justice delayed is not justice denied, if we act when we awaken. The words fell not as excuse, but as call. He turned once more to Mr. Russo, who stood now with trembling hands, bewildered by the gathering tide of attention. And there, in a gesture unseen by the world of staged power, the Pope removed his papal ring. The symbol of his office. The ring kissed by kings and commoners alike. He placed it in Mr. Russo's calloused palm, worn by decades of uncelebrated labor. For 65 years you served the kingdom unseen. Today, the kingdom sees you. A hush swept through the hall like a sacred wind. Breath caught in throats. Tears welled in eyes unaccustomed to weeping. The cameras, once poised for scandal, now captured something they could not fully explain, a dignity that words alone could not frame. And as the silence held, Pope Leo's voice rose once more, this time not for the press, nor the stage, but for every soul listening. You call it naive, to honor the forgotten. I call it sacred. The air in the great hall had shifted. No longer charged with the sterile anticipation of a ceremonial event, now it trembled with the weight of conscience. Angela Ferraro stood among it all, her pulse quickened not from triumph, but from unease. She had pressed. She had provoked. Yet each answer had not collapsed beneath her words, it had risen above them. Still, pride is a stubborn companion. She steadied her voice once more, though a faint tremor betrayed the strain beneath her practiced calm. What does this gesture truly change? A final attempt, not a question of curiosity, but a shield of skepticism. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Pope Leo XIV regarded her, not as an adversary, but as one yet seeking. His gaze, clear and unflinching, met hers with a patience born not of office, but of hard-won wisdom. It changes the lens through which we see worth, he answered softly. Then, his voice rose, not in volume, but in reach. He turned from Angela, addressing the sea of faces before him. Who here, he asked quietly, thanked Mr. Russo this morning? The words hung suspended, their simplicity more piercing than any rebuke. Silence answered first. Then, the slow, heavy descent of heads. One by one, gazes fell to the floor. Even among the bishops, the politicians, the scholars, none could meet the question with an honest reply. The stillness deepened. And in that stillness, Pope Leo spoke, not to shame, but to awaken. You confuse position, with purpose, he said. In the kingdom of God, the last shall be first. The words carried no malice, only truth. A truth that landed where no argument could reach, the hidden chambers of the heart. Angela said nothing. The sharpness that had once honed her voice was now dulled by the weight of the moment. She stood, microphone lowered, eyes uncertain. The cameras continued to capture what they could, though no lens could fully frame what now unfolded, tears, unbidden, glistening upon faces both young and old. Hands clasped in reverent silence. Bowed heads not in defeat, but in reflection. The silence held, deep, aching, alive. No words were needed, for the eyes of all had turned now. Not to the stage, nor the velvet banners, but to a simple man, weathered by years of unseen labor. And in the center of that gathered throng, Pope Leo XIV reached out. Gently, without pomp or spectacle, he lifted Mr. Russo's arm, as one might raise a banner not of victory, but of truth. Today, he said, voice low yet carrying through every corner of the hall, we honor the gospel, through action. His gaze swept the crowd, not with reproach, but with invitation. How many Mr. Russos do we walk past daily? The question landed not upon ears, but upon conscience. For each present knew, whether in marble halls or in the dust of their own lives, there were faces they had failed to see. The worth of a man is not in his title, Pope Leo continued, but in his heart. And though cameras recorded, though the world beyond watched through glass and screen, those words were not meant for headlines. They were meant to echo where no lens could reach. "We do not need more voices shouting," he said at last, his tone softening to that of a shepherd among his flock. "We need more hearts, listening." And in that moment, no further argument could rise. No clever question, no sharp retort. For the room had been stripped of pretense, clothed now in the quiet garment of truth. What remained, as the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, was not the sound of applause, nor the flash of cameras, nor even the headlines that would soon follow. What remained was a question. A question each soul carried now, quiet, weighty, unshakable. For if on that day, you had walked those polished halls, if you had seen that old man, bent with age, forgotten in plain sight, what would you have done? Would you have walked by, eyes fixed upon the stage, heart tethered to the spectacle of power? Or would you have stopped, and honored him? The choice is no less real today than it was beneath those vaulted ceilings. The Mr. Russos of this world still move among us. Silent, unseen, faithful. And the measure of our hearts, is not in the grand words we speak, but in the quiet dignity we afford to those who serve when no one is watching. So I ask you now, may we all seek truth with humble hearts, and never mistake applause for anointing. If this truth stirs something within you, then subscribe to God's message for souls, not for stories, but for awakenings. And if you still will not, write below, what part of this truth makes you uncomfortable today? For the work of the heart begins, when the story ends.